Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us again on Untraditional Industries. This is Alex. I'm joined by Emily and Beth Miller of the Creative Education Foundation. So thanks so much, Beth, for joining us. Untraditional Industries is a series that we do where we highlight the more untraditional stories of people in maybe somewhat traditional industries. I think that there's a lot of stories out there that maybe get overlooked because the industry might not be this super um, glamorous thing that's blasted all over Silicon Valley type stuff like nowadays. So thanks so much for joining us. And for anybody watching who doesn't know who you are, Beth, or what the Creative Education Foundation is, could you give us a little bit background on that? How you got into your current role there and just, a little story.
Great, sure. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Again, my name is Beth Miller. I am the Executive Director of the Creative Education Foundation. The Creative Education Foundation was actually founded in Buffalo by Alex Osborne in 1954. So if you didn't know it, Buffalo is the birthplace of creative problem solving. Alex was the O in BBDO, which is a multinational marketing firm that he actually saved from bankruptcy back in the day. And when he was known as the father of brainstorming, and he was one of the original advertising madmen. When he retired back home to Buffalo, he established the Creative Education Foundation because he believed very deeply that everybody is creative and can learn to be more creative with practice. So he didn't just believe it was innate to artists or poets or dancers, that it was something that you could apply deliberately to your life and to your work to be more successful. So that's kind of the origin story of CEF. So CEF, the organization, has been around since 1954. So we're creeping up on a 70-year anniversary. I have been with the organization for almost 7 years now, 6.5-ish. But my career was actually not in creativity. I'm a 20-year nonprofit professional. My background is in fundraising and organizational management. And I don't know how I did this, but I developed a reputation as a fixer. So probably because I ended up working at nonprofits that were struggling and I did a good job. So they bring me in to kind of get things straight. And that's been a skill set for me, getting the fundraising straight, getting the back of house, the operations functioning well so that the mission and the program work can be more effective. What else? That doesn't feel like enough of a story.
No, I think that's I didn't know, first of all, that this Buffalo was this creative place.
I'm so the best kept secret in Buffalo. I'm sick of it. So yeah. No, it was, Buffalo is a very creative place. You guys are known for inventing a lot of things, but you can add to that list creative problem solving. And, it's a deliberate way of engaging with complex problems or really great opportunities or anything that's ambiguous. So it's an incredibly powerful way of approaching life and work. And, Sid and Alex, let me jump in the boat here. Sydney Parnes was Alex's partner. So Sydney was from the academic world and Alex was from the marketing world. And they were the two founders who really developed the creative problem solving process. And they were very passionate about developing it in Buffalo, in their community. So it's a very cool history.
It is. And there's so many things we can go into, but I think this will kind of help us figure out the link between brainstorming and what you're doing now. So when CEF was first founded, what problem were they trying to solve? And how has that problem evolved since it was founded?
I think, when it was first created, the problem that Alex saw in the world is that people just weren't being creative enough in approaching life and problems. And I think as a professional in the marketing industry, he was always new idea, new idea, new idea. And, I think he couldn't help but wonder, what if we applied this to more parts of life? So the first really big endeavor that they did under the rubric of the Creative Education Foundation was the Creative Problem Solving Institute, affectionately known as CIPSE. CIPSE is our annual creativity conference. The very first one was held a year after the organization was founded in 1955. And to that conference, Alex invited a bunch of male professionals, we'll be honest, it was the 50s, to kind of teach them to be more creative in their industries. And SIPSI kept going from there. So I think that was really the problem Alex wanted to address in a very broad way, that he believed that if more people were equipped with creative problem solving, then, if he taught them to fish, so to speak, that they could go out and teach more people to do the same, and that there would be kind of an exponential growth in creative approaches to the world. I would say that the problem hasn't changed a lot to today, right? So just this morning, I was on the telephone with Sarah Raskin from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, my alma mater. She's the head of the neuroscience department there. And we've been talking a lot about how brain function and creativity, like what's the intersection between creativity function and creativity processes and brain function. And we're exploring the opportunity to do a research project together where we look at folks who've had traumatic brain injury that impacts the frontal cortex. And one of the things that they have trouble doing is changing plans. So they get very good at having routines, but if there's something important like a doctor's appointment that disrupts their normal morning series of events, they will forget to go because there's damage to the frontal cortex that allows them to be adaptable and creative. So I can't help but think we might be the missing piece, right? So if we can teach some of these folks who are otherwise pretty high functioning, but have an inability to be flexible and adaptable, if we can give them creative problem solving training, we may help them with brain issues that they've been having that impacts their daily life. So I think the problem today, there's so many opportunities to look at how deliberate creativity practices can improve life. I'm also talking with a bunch of groups about social justice issues and how we might apply creative problem solving to community conversations around race and equity and justice. And I know that I am not the right person to lead that conversation because that's not my expertise, but what I do have are so many talented creativity consultants who do these amazing processes that facilitate effective conversation that leads to real problem solving. So partnering up with folks with expertise in social justice and equity with these skills to bring that training, we really believe that there could be a positive impact in just getting us to talk effectively to one another once again. So I would say the problems today, there are certain areas of focus right now because of current social issues and social pressures, but it's the same issue that I think Alex was trying to address way back when, which is we aren't approaching things as creatively, as deliberately as we can. I think one of the things that we have all seen over this past year during the coronavirus is some amazing adaptive creativity, right? So, hockey manufacturers changing from making masks to making masks for hospital workers. That's adaptive creativity, looking at the equipment they have and saying, how can we build something different that meets this moment? So I think those innovative moments, those beautiful things that we've all seen over this past year that inspire us and show how people are really figuring it out how to live during coronavirus, that is all an example of our natural creativity coming to the fore. That need and restriction is actually forcing us to create creative solutions. And it's one of the things I like to say, a lot of people think of creativity as thinking out of the box. Yes, and creativity is also when you're in a box. You have to be really creative when you have a lot of rigid restraints, like you can't go outside or touch people anymore. That's pretty rigid. And yet a lot of creativity has come out of this time because it's needed. So I would say that that's the same challenge I really hope to address with our work today is, where is the greatest need? Because we know that if we unlock everyone's individual creativity to be able to address ambiguity and challenge in powerful ways, that they can change their lives, their world, their workplace. So we want to make that more.
Yeah. What I love about that is I feel like sometimes we think of their creative jobs and then non-creative jobs where really there's the capacity to be creative in any role or any industry,
Absolutely.
so I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
We like to say is if you've had to figure out how to get food on the table, do your job, help your kid through their homework, get the house clean, you've been creative that day. So it's everything.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of people are more creative than they give themselves credit for. And that's a, I think when people oversimplify creativity, obviously, I would say like you just, that was a lot that probably the vast majority of people, when they think about creativity, don't think about. Um, so it was good to hear that side of it. Um, I'm curious, how does the Creative Education Foundation define success? This is one of
Mm.
my favorite questions, and I think it would be interesting to hear how you guys define
Yeah,
success.
I have to figure out how to answer that. So how do we define success? I would say on the micro level, um, when we see success, we see someone engaging with the creative problem solving process for the first time. The 4 steps to clarify, ideate, develop, and implement, or one of the tools, phrasing problems as a question, or that when you are brainstorming or diverging, you don't judge questions, answers, you just let them come. That you learn to converge on things when they get the tools and specific equipment of the process, and you see that light bulb moment. You see them realize, oh, that thing I did was creative. Like I am creative, or there is a way through this problem. One of my favorite tools that we use is really just phrasing statements as a question. So instead of saying, it's not in the budget, right? Which I said a lot to my board when I first came on, and they got mad at me for crushing their spirit. But it may be true that it's not in the budget, but a way to use creative problem solving to make that a collaborative conversation is to say, how might we make that budget neutral? Or in what ways might we get this funded? Right? So instantly, by changing from statement to a question, you're no longer on opposite sides of the table arguing a point. You're on the same side of the table looking at the problem together and how to solve that. So when simple things like that, and you see the light bulb go off in somebody's head, realizing, having self-awareness, oh, when I was saying that really true thing, it's not in the budget, and I was getting, angry at people, I wasn't wrong, but I wasn't being creative. So how can I have that self-awareness and use that to create better relationships? When we see that, and we see it a lot with folks at our conference, we hear that back from them, that they've taken a nugget. They don't have to be expert creative problem solvers, but they get a nugget from it that really allows them to move forward in their lives in some way. That looks like success to us on the smaller scale. On the larger scale, I would like it if people in Buffalo knew about us. That would be a success. I think also I'm trying to figure out how to measure this, right? So how might we show success? So part of the partnership I was just talking about with Dr. Raskin around neuroscience and creativity, that's the kind of science that I would love to dig into to see, how does creativity work on a brain function level to help people be more successful on a neurobiology level. If we could figure out some more data around these things, and there is data out there, but I want to explore that more deeply, that how processes really can improve. So, in the nonprofit sector, well, anywhere really, evaluating what you're doing and what's working and what is successful is kind of a perennial challenge to continue to do that. But I think if we start from that genesis of that individual impact, where we see people have what we call the aha moment, that something breaks free in them and they realize gifts that they've already had and have already used, and that moment of great empowerment and eagerness to apply further. That looks like success to me.
And is that so? Would your definition for you personally, is that the same? Is that how you define success then for yourself personally as well, or is it different?
Yes, I think it's very close.
Okay.
Resilience, for me, it's kind of moving through challenging. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, moving through challenges. I think out loud. It's moving through things well. I had my story is a little different. I actually didn't graduate from college until I was 31. I failed out of college twice, and then went back as an adult. And I actually left a really bad relationship to go back to college, and I didn't have any money or anywhere to live, so I moved into a freshman dorm when I was 30. There's a book in that if I can find the time to write it. So it was super awesome. It anyway, I finished my degree at Trinity College as an adult student. I lived on $200 a year. My dorm mates would give me extra food on their meal cards, so I had food to eat. All the ladies that worked in the cafeteria, it was near an office I worked at, they would let me know when there was leftover meeting food. There's sandwiches in the conference room, Beth. I'm like, great. And I'd go get some food. So I finished my degree, in this kind of untraditional way, and rolled right into a fellowship with Trinity College. And about halfway through my first semester, while I'm in my master's program, the English department reached out to me and asked me to teach English 101. And then the development department reached out to me and asked me to help them write grants. So I went from homeless undergrad to member of the faculty in about 2 years. And
Awesome.
I taught writing at Trinity for 10 years as a visiting lecturer,
Wow.
which was great. But then I had also started this kind of fundraising career in nonprofit, which I hated at first. And I was doing the adjunct thing for a while. And this is really hard. Like you tell people you're a professor and they're like, ooh, that's great. And I'm like, I had no health insurance. I was running between 3 colleges to try to cobble together a career, and enough money, God forbid my car broke down, it would be all done. And then I got recruited for a full-time position at a nonprofit, and that really set me on my path as a nonprofit professional. And that was hard too, because I'm entering the workforce at a very junior level as a 33-year-old woman. And the things I was rewarded for as an adult student in college, namely speaking up and being argumentative, were not particularly desired in the workplace, which befuddled me. I'm like, people think I'm brilliant. You should take this criticism, boss lady. Didn't work that way. So, kind of having those growing pains and figuring out how can I really manifest my gifts and my passion for nonprofit work, being the wrong age, and having very strong opinions about how leadership should work when I'm not a leader. And eventually I had enough bad bosses in the nonprofit sector. I decided I really wanted to be an executive director. I felt like I could do it better, which is pretty arrogant, but that's what I decided. And so I had been a development director for many years, and I wasn't getting promoted. So I quit and I stopped working, and I got a fellowship at a place called Third Sector New England, and they do executive director placements. And I was doing some fellowship work with them around consulting on fundraising. And I took every single person in the department that did executive director placement out for lunch and asked them, why won't people hire me? And they read my resume and gave me feedback. And my next job that I applied for with this kind of new perspective from them was Creative Education Foundation. And I've been here and for 6 years, and we've made a great success of it. So that's probably the story I was supposed to tell before. So, so that was my very long journey. But I think, to go back to your other question, Alex, I think for me, success has always been knowing when I'm the problem. And, even when I think I'm totally right, that you're being a bad leader, or the situation is hard, or that's not the way you always do it. If I'm getting the same message from people, even if I think I'm right, maybe I'm the common denominator. And having the courage to look at that, and maybe it's as dramatic as moving into a dormitory to finish my degree, or leaving my livelihood without security, to try to learn more about myself so I can take that next step. Those very scary moments have always worked out for me, but it's self-reflection that's really been it, and being willing to say, maybe I need to look inside before I can make change in the outside world.
That's awesome. That that's a yeah. Never heard someone give that answer, and I think that more people should maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why you started off with resilience, because that's literally a remarkable story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And I agree, like I've had moments like that in my life too, where you take a risk, and it always, I mean, looking back over the years, it always ends up being for the best, more than you could ever have imagined. So
Right.
really cool. So what have been your biggest challenges since you took on this role at CEF, and how have they evolved over time?
Yeah. So The toughest challenge coming into the Creative Education Foundation was that, so prior for me coming on board, they hadn't had an executive director in place for about 3 years. The previous executive director had left. There had been some financial struggles, and that was a culmination of kind of the failure of the dot-com boom way before, and it finally articulated like around 2011, 2012. So here's this very long-standing organization with a really big community and a beloved conference. And they thought they might have to close the doors. So the board at the time scaled down the operation so that they could afford to keep running, at least run the conference. And they took over and ran the organization, which included the conference, our academic journal, and some other programs. And they right-sided the organization over that 3-year period, which put them in the position to do a search for an executive director, which they found me. And I know one of the things that excited them about my candidacy was my fundraising expertise and my longstanding nonprofit management expertise. Those were clearly gaps. So I wasn't hired as a creativity professional for a CEF, even though it's a creativity organization, because that was the one thing they were super strong in. What they weren't super strong in is how to run the nonprofit business end. So I was brought in for that gap. So that said, I think that there was a little bit of an assumption that maybe I wouldn't have an interest in programs, but I'm an educator, so I did have an interest in programs. So there were some growing pains at the beginning, kind of jockeying for position, who's going to do what. And I really wanted to lead. So I think in the beginning, the growing pains of my leadership transition into the organization were a little challenging because the board had been leading. And, we found our way, and, things are really great right now, but I don't think that's uncommon when you bring in a senior leader working with other leadership members. Those kinds of transitions, getting used to one another, defining, like, you have the job description and you think you know the job, but until you have different people in those roles and really see how you interact with one another, individual strengths, all of those things, those are all variables you don't know until you've been in the seat for a while, which is why those first 90 days are so critical. For me, what I did, knowing that, is I questioned people. I interviewed 52 people in our community, asked them all the same questions about what they loved about the organization, what they wish is better. And I got this real introduction to how the community felt about the nonprofit and other leaders in it. And that was a really great place for me to kind of create a strategy moving forward, and to kind of lessen those growing pains, but it doesn't get rid of them. Kind of have to find your roles. So like any nonprofit, or like not any, many, fundraising, sustainable income is an issue. Lack of capacity in general with nonprofits is an issue. You generally are under-resourced, overworked, and you don't have staff that, we don't get professional development. That's what we do. Like, we give creative problem solving professional development, but generally nonprofit workers don't have the opportunity to get that professional development. And when you think about, here we've got people on the front lines of our most critical social issues, and we pay them crap, and we don't give them any professional development, and we don't give them the tools to do their job well. I mean, and then we raise hell if we feel like they're making too much money. I'm like, they're only trying to solve homelessness. Maybe they should be able to pay the mortgage. I'm just saying, like, feel like that's a basic human need. So I think, that's a kind of a blanket issue with the nonprofit sector and how it's perceived as, we should just do it for the love of it. That was an ethos created many years ago when the college-educated, wealthy, turn-of-the-century women were starting, opera societies and war memorials and things like that. They had high education and all this money they didn't know what to do with. So that created an ethos in the nonprofit sector that we should do good for good's sake. I'm a first-generation student and a kid from a blue-collar family. I work for a living, so I need to get paid. Over the years, the last 100 years, the sector has evolved considerably. It is now a profession. I am an expert. It's not a junior business. And we are grappling with critical social issues in this world, from education to, cultural treasures, to the arts, to direct service. So I think that is, incredibly, it's a big challenge over, the littler challenges of leadership transition within organizations that keeps a lot of pressure in this sector in general. And I felt that. So coming into this organization that had just come out of a slump. Now all of a sudden they're paying a salary, so they're going to go in another financial slump because they weren't paying a salary for an executive director for 3 years. So you have to earn the money to to show that you deserve to be there, but also support all your other staff. Really evaluating the fundraising structure and the earned revenue structure for the organization was a big challenge, while keeping the programs going, and getting the right leadership and staff in place to do that work were the pivotal challenges in my first 3 years. I'm happy to say we're doing great now. So the work paid off.
Good. Glad to hear that. And that's, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You're talking when I don't think a lot of people think about that part of, you're solving these huge issues, yet people complain that you make a lot of money. I don't know that. uh, That's crazy. It's when you put it like that, it's just like, well, it makes total sense that they should make this money. But yeah. So to kind of go back a little bit to one of the points you brought up earlier about self-reflection, I'm curious, what are either some or maybe just one mistake that you've made along the way, and what's something that you've learned from it?
Oh, just one? Well, I'll relate this to another question I've gotten in interviews before. People will say, what's your biggest strength and your biggest flaw, or something to that effect. And I usually answer that with, my righteousness. And that can go either way. It's good to be righteous, when you work in the nonprofit sector. However, if you're completely sure you're right, that does not necessarily facilitate conversation. So sometimes I've had incidences where I like to say I pop my blue collar and I get like, I'm ready to go. I'm feeling pretty righteous about something. And there's been many times, like sometimes I'll get triggered and I'm like, yeah, I'll go, let's fight. And that's not the right way to deal with a lot of issues in the business world. So, what I think I've learned is the courage to kind of self-correct when I feel those moments happening, and to not be an instigator. So I think that most of the times when I think of when I didn't do well in a moment, it was usually when I was standing up for what I thought were really big reasons, going toe to toe with a board member or a donor or a board or a boss, and saying, no, it should be done this way. And it's not that I was wrong. I think that's the big lesson, like learning that maybe your position, it's not that your position is incorrect. It's, what's the most important thing in that moment? Is it winning the fight? Is it showing that you're not going to get pushed over? Or is there something bigger that you're trying to argue for? And, I think that comes with maturity and practice. And I will say I've been very immature until age 52 now. So I think that one of the big moments for me is it's people phrase it as choosing your battles, and it's not, it's a little bit more than that. It's kind of choosing the moment and the battle, right? So if you're talking to someone, you're always going to get further if you can have a civil and productive conversation, and kind of understanding where somebody is coming from with a work challenge is sometimes more important and more productive for you eventually than getting your point in. So I think I've learned to zip it a little bit more, to wait, just give it a beat and hear everything they're saying. It doesn't mean that I back down a lot. And I think anyone who works with me would testify to that. It does mean that I listen and take in a little bit more information. And one of the things I tell my coworkers all the time is, help them get to yes, right? When you want to ask someone for something, what do you have to give to them to get to yes? So, when I call them my coworkers, this is the folks that work for me. I don't like to call them my team, but my coworkers will sometimes, sometimes before they would send me like just an email link or something. And I'm like, what do I do with this? Is this because you love me? Is it, what am I doing? And I think there was a timidity about saying, I think this is a good idea. We should do this as an organization or something, giving some context, right? So we talked about that. And I said, listen, I want you to get me to yes. And I said, all of you know the first two things I'm going to ask when you want to do something new. Can we afford it? do we have the staff capacity to support it? And if you can cross those first two hurdles, I trust that it meets the mission, because you guys are all brilliant about that. So if you can answer those two questions before I ask them, I'm probably going to say yes. So I brought that. That's something that I've learned the hard way in dealing with other folks. If I'm trying to get something done with them or do something for the organization, how can I get that person to yes? 9 times out of 10, it is not me telling them how wrong they are and how right I am. So what are the things for that? So I think the many mistakes I've made in my career are generally based in that kind of sense of righteousness and a need to defend myself and prove that I'm worthy, which is born of the insecurity of failing out of college a few times, all real stuff, but that it's not effective for really moving forward in my own career or moving forward the work of the organization I represent. So how can you be a better listener and get people to yes is really what I've learned from being righteous at the wrong time.
Amazing. And it's interesting what you were saying about those two questions you always ask your staff, because sometimes having, like you were saying earlier, like when you're in a box, you have to be creative. So sometimes having limits, like strict limits and more of a filter, helps you be more creative. So
Exactly
it's kind
right.
of like what you're preaching, you're also practicing, which is cool.
Yeah,
Um,
those are all correct statements.
and kind of in the same vein, so we serve very traditional industries. Buffalo is a very blue collar city at its heart. And I know we kind of talked about this before, but sometimes the most creative people are in those industries. They just don't consider themselves creative. So, what do you think businesses get wrong or misunderstand about creativity? And how can more traditional industries begin to recognize and harness the power of their own creativity?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think the biggest mistake people make is they think they don't need it, right? I think they think if they have efficiency and systems and don't interject creativity into that, though there will be a little creativity in it. If they don't embrace creativity, they're going to miss out on a lot. And particularly in manufacturing, the men and women working on the shop floor, they know how everything works better than anybody. So if you're not tapping into that wisdom and experience, you are absolutely missing out on ways to make more money. We had one of our creativity consultants worked with a company, a manufacturing company, and they brought creative problem solving practice into the company, throughout the company. So the folks working on the shop floor to the front office. And one of the results of letting the folks that turn the wrenches participate in creative problem solving around the functionality in the manufacturing arm of the business was they reduced within 6 months, they reduced to they got rid of 400,000 CSMs. Those are continuous strength movements. So if you think about guys who literally turn a wrench, imagine doing that 400,000 fewer times when you work, right? So that goes to workplace safety, that goes to injury prevention, that goes to fatigue, boredom. Like how many things does that change? So that person's brain power is lessened because they don't have to. And I'm not talking about automation. I'm talking about making, human jobs more creative, more functional. They didn't get that solution from the CEO. They got it from the guys who turned the wrench, who said, well, what if we did the process this way? We might not have to do this so many times. More tangentially, they also that year saved the organization $4.8 million from efficiencies that the shop floor workers created because they were invited into creative problem solving. Now, the bigger that you hear like numbers like that, and you're like, well, why isn't everyone doing it? Because it's not fast, and people are like, fix it now, like bring in the consultant, give us the great solution. And so, because we got a meeting at 1, it doesn't work that way, right? So, and it's a process. So it's not like you learn it once and then it always works. You have to keep doing it. So when you practice creative problem solving, you're making space and time for people to stop being tactical thinkers and operators and allowing them to be strategic. And you need to create space for that. You need there to be room for error. People need to experiment and fail. You don't want epic failure. You don't want things to blow up or anything, but incremental failure leads to great success. this is the thing that top corporations, Google, places like Google and things have figured out because they value creativity. So they make space for creativity. But then a lot of other businesses, they're like, we don't have the time and money for that. I would argue you don't have the time and money not to. So the time that you invest in really the creative, the innate creativity of the people already working for you, unlock that. It will benefit your business and you will have happier, more productive, more loyal employees. I think that's the biggest mistake people make.
Can I ask a question that's off the script? You said something that made me think, and what's the difference between creative problem solving and problem solving?
Nothing.
Easy.
There we go.
Done. What's your next question? No, actually, our name gives us a lot of trouble because we have all these super nerdy debates in the creativity community. Like, why do we have problem in the middle of our process? It makes everyone thinks it's negative, and yeah, whatever. So creative problem solving. It does have problem in it, but I would say that one of the differences, and our founder Sid Parn said this a lot. They're not challenges, they're opportunities. So when you say problem, that obviously there's a weight to that. Like there's a thing I have to solve, and there's a sense of urgency about it. Creative problem solving is also, it's a way of dealing with any complex issue, is really that. So it could be a complex challenge, or it could be a complex opportunity, or it could just be something ambiguous that you need to figure out. So I think that's it. Problem solving, it's kind of one and the same, and we're, kind of, you've nailed it in a way, Alex, that, we're always encountering something, some kind of friction or tension that we have to grapple with. And 9 times out of 10, whether we know it or not, we're going to apply some kind of creative solution to deal with that situation.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So I think I know, after only knowing you for 38 minutes, the answer to this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Can you make a case for why every industry should invest in creativity of their employees and in understanding the creative process?
Yes. Every industry should invest in it because you will make more money. You will have a happier workforce, a more successful workforce. You will retain them. You will have more fun. And you will open up possibilities that you thought could never be changed. One of the biggest things that we'll see if people bring a problem to us for creative problem solving intervention is that they're running into the same problem year after year. And like, we've brought in these consultants, we've done this, we've done that, and we can't solve this problem. When that happens, it generally means they're not asking the right question. So they're solving for something that isn't actually the root issue, and that's why they're never getting to it. So if I don't want to use a gross comparison. I was going to do a medical one, but that's not a good idea. So like, you have to get to like the core cause, not the symptom, in order to really get rid of the thing that's the problem, right? So I think that's the biggest issue. And I would challenge any company to say that there isn't something that they're always running up against that is a problem, that we can't retain our workers. We can't find highly skilled enough workers. The market has changed since COVID. These things that may seem really, really impossible. Creative problem solving will help you find a different solution to that. And it won't be fast because you're not used to doing it and you have to figure that out. So it's a way of changing how you approach problems. We talk about, when we teach creative problem solving, we teach the mindset, the skill set, and the tool set. People often just want the skill, just give me the tool so I can, use the hammer and fix it. The mindset's really important. And that's the more difficult thing to change people from just saying statements to asking questions. How might we not worry about staff retention anymore? How might we curb staff retention instead of we can't hold on to people? Really practicing and living that. And the more people practice the process of creative problem solving, the more intuitively they will be able to step into solution making and not get bogged down in, this is how we've always done it. Oh, this is hard for everybody. My most recent example for that is when coronavirus hit, this almost a year ago now. Oh my God. We were already selling our conference. So SIPC is the conference we hold every year, annual creativity conference. We do it at the University of Buffalo when we're allowed to be in front of other people. And as the pandemic was ramping up, I'm like, we can't gather a bunch of people from international countries together. That's like incredibly irresponsible. And I am not a health expert, so we canceled it. And the impact on our organization of canceling the conference, we don't make a lot of money on it, but it generates most of our operational funds for the year. So canceling it as a live event where I could charge a fair amount for people to go, put a 6-figure hole in my 6-figure budget. That's pretty devastating. But I don't think anyone should die for creativity. So that's what we're with. So how do we make this work? And because my coworkers and I practice creative problem solving all the time, once we clarified the issue, we cannot hold the conference during a pandemic. It's not safe. Okay, so what do we do now? And the result of it was a virtual conference, 3 weeks long, more than 30 courses, wildly well attended. It did not completely fill the gap for the loss of holding the conference live, but I didn't have to spend as much because I wasn't renting a university campus. So my expenses went down. And we actually did such a great job doing virtual workshops and sessions that people started asking us to teach them how to do it. So we got a whole new revenue stream out of this, teaching how to do good meetings on Zoom as a new revenue stream. And we developed all this other virtual curriculum. So we went from a situation where we had to change how we'd always done it, a live conference, to developing virtual curriculum. Now we have year-round curriculum that is revenue generating. And now we're thinking in bigger ways. How might we couple virtual training with live training to create deeper experiences? We also got some PPP money and some emergency disaster loan money. That's where my fundraising chops came in. So the team figured out the programming. I figured out the sustainability. We had the best fundraising year for our annual fund than we've ever had because people were incredibly generous. So we're fine. Nobody lost their jobs. I had a lot of contingency plans, like giving up my salary to keep everyone on staff. We didn't have to do that, but we found our way through. So sometimes those, challenges that can be so epic that make you feel frozen. If you have creative problem solving skills and you have a team around you that is also fluent in, not expert in it, but know how to engage in the process and know what the steps are, you can tackle anything and be successful even in a time of deficit.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a great story. And based on, all of your amazing experiences, if you could give one piece of advice to a business leader in any industry, what would it be?
Mm. I would say it's not about you. It's not about you. If you're a leader, it's even if it's your business, I would say it's not about you. If you start a business or you work in nonprofit, whatever, like me, there's something you're trying to create in the world, right? Whether it's a product or it's a missions, a service, you're trying to do something bigger than yourself. And it's important to be a leader and have the ego strength to be able to do a podcast or stand up in front of a crowd or whatever, that strength has to be there. But if you start making it all about you, you're going to forget about the work and the people. And that's really important. So I think leadership's a lot softer than I thought it was when I first thought about being a leader. It's a lot more listening. And knowing when you step in and say, no, this is the way it's going to be. Right? There's a time when you really have to do that and say, thank you for your feedback. No, we're doing it this way. But it's not about you, right? And the thing, if you do a great job at it, like that credit and those accolades and those things will come. But in the moment of the work, keep an eye on the work and find a way to lift the people around you up and help them be as successful as possible. One of the things I love about, we're a nonprofit, so we have a board of directors, a volunteer board of directors, and they all want me personally and the staff to be wildly successful. And they, of course, it's their purview to make sure the organization is successful, but we see that as one and the same. So I think that is incredibly important. It's not about you. It's about the work.
I've learned a lot from this. I appreciate that. So this is why we do this. We bring people on and we get this free consulting. No,
Alex.
yeah. Thanks so much, Beth, for coming on. Though I hope everybody watching learned as much as I did. This one, I'll honestly, not joking. Like, that's why I enjoy doing these. It's super fun to learn these things. I never knew about this, and it was just a lot. It was very informative. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's nice to pick my head up from the work and talk about it every once in a while.
And thanks, Emily, for hosting with me. And thanks, everybody, for watching. So thanks so much. And we'll see you all next time.